Hi, this is my first video on this channel. Lately, I've been listening to this podcast. Screw it, we're just going to talk about Spider-Man. And on this podcast, these two brothers speak about the early Stan Lee Ditko issues and their storylines and their remembrances of these issues as they read them. I thought I would do a video on my early experience with Spider-Man. One of my first memories of Spider-Man, I was born in the early 60s, and the first thing I ever remember of Spider-Man is, of course, this.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man.
Then years went by, and I would see this show occasionally on television in reruns. And, I kind of was aware of Spider-Man. But the next time I saw Spider-Man was in an issue of Dynamite Magazine, Dynamite Magazine number 4. I don't know if you guys remember this. Dynamite Magazine was a young readers magazine that had current events, but they also had this section called Comic Book Confidential, which reprinted origin stories basically in 4 pages, and they would edit it down always to these 4 pages. And I remember seeing Ditko's Spider-Man origin right up to the point where he dons his Spider-Man costume. And that was a revelation. I've never seen anything like that. Drawing the blacks and the expression on Peter Parker's face, it kind of really drove into me. And that was the first time I ever got pencil and paper and tried to draw a character, was copying Steve Ditko's Spider-Man. And that was my second introduction to Spider-Man. Then the third time was getting reading friends' comic books, and that was the early 70s. And so it was like Spider-Man 143, which was Spider-Man versus the Cyclone. He visits Paris, and this character, a French villain called the Cyclone, and at the very end of the issue, Gwen Stacy shows up. Of course, I didn't know who Gwen Stacy was at that time. And then I, would see issues of Spider-Man on occasion. The next time I would see a real revelation of Spider-Man was in 1975. I got this large, oversized comic, Marvel Special Edition, Spectacular Spider-Man. And in this book, which, these 3 stories were reprinted. It was the annual number 1, which was the Sinister 6. And then also issue number 6, which was the Lizard first storyline. And then a reprint of issue, I think it was 35, The Return of Molten Man. And again, this was another experience of Ditko artwork, which was quite different from the other stuff I had been reading and seeing at the time, which was much finer, much polished, but this had a kind of raw intensity to it that really spoke to me. Especially the Sinister 6 storyline was very, there's these splash pages for every single villain, one for Mysterio, one for Electro, one for Sandman, Vulture, Doc Ock, and Craven, and they were just amazing 1-page splashes. And since this was an oversized comic, it was very impressive. And then the artwork in the Lizard issue was just so well done. It was these really dark lines and shadows, and it was kind of sad and creepy, and it really affected me. I was reading this, and I was so used to Ross Andrews' artwork at the time, and then to see Ditko was such a polar opposite, really. And then I started actually collecting Spider-Man kind of on a regular basis around 150. 150 was this issue where Spider-Man kind of trying to speculate whether he's the clone or if he's the real Spider. Yes, way back then was a clone story. And then I would get issues on a semi-regular basis until I think issue around 162 or something. Then I actually did mail-in subscriptions. And I was getting Spider-Man on a regular basis in the mail. I would receive issues of Spider-Man, the new issues at that time, and Marvel shipped these issues and wrapped in brown paper. No plastic covering, just brown paper. And so I would get these issues and they would be folded a lot of times. And if it was raining that day, they would be soaking wet. But, you know, they were my issues and I was getting them on a regular basis. And I was collecting these right up until basically when I stopped collecting comics at the time, which was the late 1978. And of course, I was just about to enter high school. Everyone was trying to convince me you're too old to collect comics. And I was, so my collecting had started tapering off. But that run and those issues that ended on this really great storyline on the Return of the Green Goblin. You know, it was a 4-issue story where the Green Goblin comes back and Spider-Man thinks it's Harry Osborn, and it's revealed to be Harry Osborn, psychiatrist. And it was really a great way to end it. And those were all Len Wein issues. And also at the same time, near 77, 78, I had been also getting the Marvel Treasury Edition number 14, which reprinted the Morbius story. So, Morbius the Living Vampire, which took all 3 issues, it was 100, 101, 102, and they reprinted them into this one Treasury size edition. So it was a large size reprint of that storyline. Again, I was impressed with Gil Kane's artwork at the time. And plus, Morbius the Living Vampire was kind of creepy. And it has the lizard in it. And it was a fun book. And those Treasury editions, because of the size, they were really fun to read because the pictures are so large in them. And I collected Spider-Man through the mail right up until the end of 1978. And then I wouldn't collect comic books again until the late 80s. And really, those are my early recollections of Spider-Man. Right from those cartoons through the 70s issues and those Treasury Edition size books, which really had an impact on me. I kind of wish they did a lot of those Treasury size books again. It's a great way to get kids excited about books. I mean, comic books. Right now, you get comic books nowadays, and you kind of think of them even more disposable. I don't know. It just doesn't seem to have the grandeur that I remember from the kids, but that could be nostalgia. Well, if you like this video, click the subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and let me know. And maybe you can leave a comment. What was your first recollection of Spider-Man? What do you remember as a kid? Thanks.